a splash of muddy water, a cruel laugh from a luxury car, and a young hotel cleaner left soaked, humiliated, and unseen. But what no one knew was that someone had been watching, and from that single act of silent cruelty, a quiet revolution began. This isn't a story about revenge, it's a story about rising with grace in a world that tried to bury her in silence. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now let's get into the story. The morning sky over Manhattan was a quiet shade of gray, like a canvas not yet touched by light. The city moved on, half awake and unaware that a moment of deep injustice was about to bloom quietly and without warning. In a forgotten corner near Central Park West, Raina Thompson walked with her head low, her shoulders hunched against the chill. She wore a faded blue cleaning uniform, her hands tucked into the sleeves, clutching a small paper bag with a sandwich wrapped inside and a pair of worn gloves. The sidewalk was slick from last night's rain, and puddles mirrored the empty city skyline above. Her shoes 2 sizes too large and held together by hope and thread, squished with each step. But she didn't slow down. She couldn't afford to. Raina was already running late to her shift at the exclusive Grand Ludlow Hotel, and tardiness was a privilege she couldn't afford. Just as she reached the corner where Fifth Avenue curved into the plaza, the silence was shattered. A sleek black Mercedes polished to a mirror shine tore down the narrow lane. Without slowing, it plowed through a shallow puddle, sending a high arc of muddy water directly onto Raina. It was instant. Cold brown sludge splashed across her face, drenched her uniform, and soaked her paper bag until it fell apart in her hands. Her sandwich disintegrated on the ground, her gloves floated in dirty water, and she stood still as a statue trembling from shock. The car screeched to a casual stop just a few feet ahead. A tinted window rolled down halfway, revealing a pale hand decorated in diamond rings and a wristwatch that could pay someone's rent for a year. From behind oversized sunglasses, Bianca Rutherford smirked. "Well, darling, maybe don't walk so close to the street next time," she said with a hollow laugh. Her lipstick was perfect. Her cruelty was too. She rolled the window back up and drove off. Raina didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her lips parted for a moment, then closed again. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the gloves from the mud, wrung them out without thinking, and continued walking. Her hair clung to her face. Her shoes squeaked, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't. Across the street from the second-floor window of a corner cafe, a man in a tailored charcoal coat set his coffee cup down slowly. His name was Marcus Weller. He was 38, African American, and one of the most influential real estate investors on the East Coast. To those who didn't know better, he looked like just another sharp businessman on a morning break. But Marcus noticed things. He had learned long ago that the most telling moments in people's lives were never loud. They were silent. He had seen the splash. He had seen Bianca Rutherford's window roll down. He recognized her instantly, the heiress of the Rutherford family fortune, famous for her line of high-end fashion boutiques, and infamous for her disdainful attitude toward anyone not dressed in silk. But it wasn't Bianca that held Marcus's gaze. It was Raina. The way she didn't curse, didn't chase the car, didn't collapse, just picked herself up and walked forward like she'd done this before, like she knew life had no pause button, even after someone humiliated you. Marcus pulled out his phone. "Get me her name," he said softly. "The girl in the Grand Ludlow uniform who just got splashed outside the cafe." His assistant on the other end was silent for a beat. "Yes, sir." That afternoon, Raina arrived at the service entrance of the Grand Ludlow Hotel, soaked to her bones. Her backup uniform was in her locker, and the wet one went straight into the utility sink. As she entered the linen closet to gather supplies, the stares began. Some co-workers shook their heads. Others smirked. No one helped. She moved like a ghost through the hallways, invisible except when convenient. Her supervisor, Mr. Lang, barely looked up from his clipboard. "You're late," he said flatly. "I'm sorry. I was. Save it. VIP lounge needs detailing. And next time, come dry." Raina nodded, pressing her lips together. Back in the cafe, Marcus stood to leave. He didn't like making snap decisions, but something in his gut pulled at him. He had grown up watching his mother work triple shifts just to keep food on the table, only to be overlooked by those she served with such devotion. The expression on Raina's face reminded him of his mother. Not the sadness, but the refusal to be broken. Before stepping out into the cold air, Marcus turned back for one last glance. A trail of muddy footprints faded into the crowd, but the memory of that moment, that girl's quiet dignity, clung to him, like the echo of a dropped stone. Bianca Rutherford would continue her day blissfully unaware. But the splash she sent wasn't just water. It was the beginning of a reckoning. Raina Thompson had no idea someone had seen her, but she would learn soon enough. The world is full of people who look away and a few who don't. As the sun rose over Charleston's cobbled streets, Layla Monroe stood at the back entrance of the Ashbourne Grand Hotel, her shoulders square despite the fatigue in her bones. She had barely slept, haunted by the splash of mud and the haunting laughter that followed. Yet today, she wore her backup uniform pressed with as much pride as her heart could muster. Her hair pulled into a neat bun still held the scent of lavender soap from the cheap bar she used sparingly. She stepped inside, greeted by silence. A few of the other cleaners nodded, in passing, some with pity, others with veiled disdain. The whisper of her promotion to the VIP floor had already begun its rounds, and with it the slow drip of resentment. But Layla didn't let it break her rhythm. She clocked in, gathered her supplies, and headed to the penthouse floor. The air smelled like jasmine and wealth. This floor was different. The carpets were plush, swallowing her footsteps. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, reflecting a city alive with possibility. Layla approached each task with the same reverence she once saw her mother give to their modest apartment. Every corner mattered, every detail was sacred. Midway through polishing a crystal vase, she felt eyes on her. Turning slightly, she caught a glimpse of a man seated in the lounge chair near the piano. It was the same man who had asked for directions the day before. Now he wore no disguise, just a calm expression and a softness in his gaze. "Morning," he said simply. "Good morning, Sir." Layla replied quickly, averting her eyes. "I never got your name yesterday," he said, standing slowly. "Layla," she replied, hesitant. "Layla Monroe." He extended a hand. "I'm Julian Crest." She paused, dustcloth in one hand, before shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not overbearing. There was something in the way he looked at her, not like a man studying a worker, but like a man remembering something long buried. You remind me of someone I once knew, he said. She worked hard like you, made a life out of dust. Layla didn't know what to say, so she smiled faintly and turned back to her work. Julian didn't linger. He left with a nod and a simple, "Take care, Ms. Monroe." But something inside Layla stirred an awareness that this man was not just a guest. Later that day, back in the locker room, Layla found a small envelope in her cubby. Inside was a simple note on thick paper. "You bring light to the shadows. Keep shining." No name, no explanation, but her fingers trembled as she held it. She thought of the previous day's mud, of the echoing laughter of Camilla Duval Charleston's fashion queen. That single moment had stained her uniform, but had somehow drawn someone powerful into her orbit. Julian Crest. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Layla remembered seeing it once on a business magazine her manager left in the break room. A real estate developer, billionaire philanthropist. She never connected the man on the cover to the one in casual clothes watching her clean. In another world, Camilla stood before a mirror, trying on a diamond choker for an upcoming gala. She tossed her hair back and admired the curve of her smile. "Is the tailor here yet?" She snapped at her assistant, Amelia. "Yes, ma'am. He's downstairs." Camilla rolled her eyes. "Tell him to wait. If he doesn't like it, he can find work elsewhere." But for all her poise and shine, something nagged at her. That note, the photo, the sudden quiet from a few of her more influential friends. Her phone buzzed with alerts from gossip blogs. Some vague rumors, nothing concrete, but enough to irritate her polished armor. She opened her email and found an anonymous message: "Kindness builds kingdoms. Cruelty crumbles them." Camilla deleted it instantly, but her fingers trembled slightly. Back at the hotel, Layla was finishing her shift when her supervisor approached. "You're being assigned to the Sapphire Lounge tomorrow," he said. "VIP guests only." "Do well." Layla nodded. Another promotion. Or a test. That night, after putting her sister Ava to bed, Layla sat at the small kitchen table with a slice of toast and a half-empty jar of peanut butter. She opened her phone and typed Julian Crest into the search bar. Dozens of images came up him at charity galas, groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings. One quote stood out: "The way a person treats the unseen is the truest test of character." Layla leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Was this man helping her out of pity, or did he truly see her? At dawn, she arrived early at the Sapphire Lounge. The room was bathed in soft blue hues and floor-length curtains. She worked silently, ensuring every chair was aligned, every glass smudge-free. She was halfway through adjusting a centerpiece when a voice said, "Perfection." She turned. Julian stood there again, no cap, no sunglasses. "You keep showing up," she said softly. "So do you," he replied. They stood in silence for a moment. "I wanted to ask," he began carefully, "if you had other dreams. Bigger ones." Layla's throat tightened. "I did. I do," she said. "But life has a way of making you forget them." Julian nodded slowly. "I haven't forgotten, and I'd like to help you remember." The morning light broke through the gauze curtains of the Sapphire Lounge, casting soft golden beams across the freshly polished floor. Layla Monroe stood near the window, her gloved hands resting quietly on the edge of a mahogany table, watching the city slowly awaken. Charleston's rhythm was distant from this high floor. Here the world was hushed and curated. But inside Layla, a different kind of movement was beginning, a quiet unraveling of doubt, a new rhythm taking shape. The previous day's exchange with Julian Crest had lingered like a warmth she wasn't sure she deserved. When someone powerful offers you the gift of being seen, it can be harder to accept than their money. It feels like a mirror held too close. But in Julian's gaze, Layla saw no charity, no condescension, only a genuine curiosity, an open door that dared her to step through. Still, she hesitated. She'd spent her entire life surviving. When her mother passed and left her to care for Ava, survival became her only language. Dreaming felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. But now, those dreams whispered again, tugging at her in the silence. As she moved through the lounge, she noticed a guest had left behind a tablet. She gently picked it up, intending to return it to reception, but something on the screen caught her eye, a paused video titled "Voices That Build Empires." It featured Julian Crest. The still image showed him standing in front of a construction site, surrounded by workers, not in a suit, but in rolled-up sleeves, dirt on his face, smiling like he belonged there. Layla stared at it for a moment. Then she locked the tablet and set it aside. Later that afternoon, the staff room buzzed with unusual energy. A new internal memo had gone out. The hotel would be launching a professional development initiative, hospitality workshops, skill-building sessions, and the chance for cleaning staff to transition into managerial tracks. Whispers flew from locker to locker. "Did you hear they're offering night classes?" Apparently, it was Mr. Crest's idea. First, Monroe gets promoted. Now this Layla heard it all, but didn't respond. She kept her head down, but her heart pounded. Was this real? Could opportunity truly trickle down to the forgotten corners of the hotel? After her shift, she found another envelope in her locker, this time with an invitation to attend the first hospitality workshop. Her name was written in elegant cursive. There was no signature, just a line at the bottom. The brightest lights are often hidden under dust. Her hands trembled slightly as she tucked the envelope into her bag. She didn't know what future waited, but something was clearly shifting, not just around her, but within her. That evening at home, she laid the envelope on the table. Ava was coloring beside her, a quiet hum in her voice, as she focused on drawing a family of stick figures in front of a building. Layla looked closer. The building had large glass windows and flags at the top. It was the Ashbourne Grand. "Is that us?" Layla asked gently. Ava nodded, smiling. "That's you in the middle. You're the boss now." Layla laughed softly. "Not yet, honey, but you will be," Ava said with conviction. Layla turned away, swallowing a lump in her throat. Maybe children could see what adults had forgotten to believe. The next day, Layla arrived at the workshop, held in one of the hotel's mid-level conference rooms. A modest spread of coffee and pastries sat on the side. Around her were 10 others, housekeeping staff, kitchen aides, bellhops, each carrying the same tentative hope in their eyes. At the front, a woman in a navy blazer introduced herself as Carla, the training director. Here she began, "Your title does not define your talent." For the next hour, Layla sat in a quiet daze, listening, absorbing. They spoke of guest experience, conflict, resolution, time management. But beneath the technicalities was something deeper belief. The belief that someone in her shoes could one day run this hotel. When the session ended, Carla handed Layla a pamphlet. "You asked a good question today," she said. "You ever consider applying for assistant guest services?" Layla blinked. "That's a management role." Carla smiled. "Yes, and you've already been managing more than you know." That evening, as she walked home beneath the dusky sky, Layla passed by a high-end boutique. In the window stood a mannequin dressed in sleek silver fabric, almost identical to the outfit Camilla Duval wore the day she splashed her. Layla stared at it for a moment. Her reflection in the glass showed her worn coat, her tired eyes, but also the quiet strength in her stance. Camilla, meanwhile, sat at a rooftop party across town surrounded by lights and shallow laughter. Her smile was practiced, but her heart wasn't in it. More whispers had reached her ears about the cleaner she splashed about the rising star at the Ashbourne Grand. And Julian's name kept surfacing. "What's the big deal with her?" she asked her stylist bitterly. "People like stories," the woman replied, adjusting a pin in Camilla's hair, "especially ones that feel like justice." Camilla's jaw clenched. There's nothing noble about mopping floors. But deep down, she knew the world had begun shifting, and not in her favor. Back at home, Layla tucked Ava into bed and stared at the scholarship application she had started drafting. She thought about everything that had happened in the last week, the splash, the silence, the small acts of kindness that had bloomed like flowers between concrete. She picked up her pen and began to write again. Somewhere in the city, Julian opened a folder labeled Monroe Layla. He scanned the notes, the workshop attendance, the feedback from her supervisors. Then he set the folder down and looked out over the city. "She's ready," he whispered. The winds were shifting, and they carried the whispers of change. The golden glow of the morning filtered through the tall windows of the Ashbourne Grand. The VIP floor, usually hushed and cold with its opulence, seemed to hum softly that day, as if the walls themselves could sense something was about to shift. Layla Monroe stood silently in the guest services alcove, her hands clasped in front of her. She had ironed her uniform twice that morning. There was a letter in her pocket, an official offer for the assistant guest services manager position. But her hands trembled not because of nerves, but because of the weight of everything that had come before. She hadn't told Ava yet. Somehow, saying it out loud made it more fragile, like a dream, too bright for daylight. She would wait until it was real, until she could walk into the apartment and hand Ava the printed offer, watch her little sister's eyes widen. A gentle knock on the side panel broke her thoughts. Julian Crest stood in the hallway, not in disguise this time, but in a dark tailored suit, crisp and commanding. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were soft. "Walk with me," he asked. Layla nodded, tucking the letter deeper into her coat pocket. They walked through the hallway in silence, at first past portraits of founders and donors, their gold-plated nameplates gleaming under chandelier light. Finally, Julian spoke. "Do you know why I've been visiting this hotel more often lately?" She glanced at him, unsure. "I assumed you had business." "I did," he said, "but not the kind most people would expect. I was looking for something, or someone who reminded me what this business is about." He paused in front of a window overlooking the city. "When I was a child, my mother worked 3 jobs. She cleaned houses by day and washed dishes at night. And every Sunday, she brought me to the park and reminded me that our value doesn't come from the floor we mop or the clothes we wear, but from how we treat others." Layla swallowed hard. She didn't want pity, but what she heard in Julian's voice wasn't pity. It was remembrance, respect. She used to say, he continued, "One day someone will see your light. Until then, keep it burning." They stood in silence for a moment longer, until he turned to face her directly. "Layla, I've been watching, not in a strange way, I hope, but because your light is exactly what this place needs. Her breath caught. I've spoken to the board. Your promotion will be publicly announced at the end of week summit. She blinked. You're announcing it publicly. Julian nodded. No more silence. You deserve to be seen. At that very moment, in a starkly different part of the city, Camilla Duval's world was beginning to fracture. Her latest campaign had flopped. One of her major sponsors had quietly pulled funding. The whispers were no longer whispers, they were echoing. In a fit of frustration, she opened her laptop and searched for herself. One of the top search results was a video clip titled Cleaner's Grace, the Layla Monroe story. It was a stitched reel of security footage, employee interviews, and images of the VIP floor, all threaded with a quiet piano melody and Julian Crest's voice narrating parts of it. Camilla watched in silence. The final frame showed the muddy splash in slow motion, frozen with a single line: dignity when denied doesn't disappear, it rises. She slammed the laptop shut. Her fingers trembled, not from anger, but from something closer to fear. Back at Ashbourne Grand, the staff had begun to whisper too, but this time in awe, not doubt. That's her, one of the bellboys murmured. The one Julian Crest mentioned in his interview. She's going to run this place someday, another replied. Layla noticed it all. The way heads turned, the way eyes softened. But she walked with humility, carrying the same silent grace that had defined her from the start. That evening, she found a gift bag resting on her desk. No card. Inside was a pair of brand new work shoes and a small silver pin in the shape of a phoenix. She smiled. She didn't need to know who had left it. The next morning, Layla entered the staff meeting room, where all employees had gathered for the monthly address. Her name was called. She stood unsure of what was expected. Julian stepped onto the small stage. This hotel has stood for tradition, excellence, and elegance, but it must also stand for growth, for fairness, and for recognition. He turned toward Layla. Today we recognize someone who began in the shadows, but chose to shine anyway. Layla stepped forward slowly. As the staff applauded, she wasn't sure if her feet were even touching the ground. When she accepted the microphone, she didn't read from the paper she'd prepared. I used to believe being invisible kept me safe, she began. That if I just did my job and stayed quiet, no one would hurt me. But now I know being seen doesn't make you weaker. It reminds you that you matter. The room was silent. Thank you, she said simply, to those who saw me, and to those who tried not to. I hope one day you'll see the people around you too. Julian stood with his hands folded, pride in his eyes. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was steady, reverent. The kind that doesn't come from spectacle, but from truth. Layla walked off the stage, not as a cleaner or a manager, but as something more, a symbol of quiet revolution, of dignity that rises despite every attempt to drown it. And this was only the beginning. The morning sun spilled over Ashbourne Grand, casting warm streaks of light onto the marble floors that Layla Monroe now walked across, not with hesitation, but with quiet assurance. The uniform she wore still bore the emblem of housekeeping, but her steps had transformed, lighter, firmer, more grounded in her sense of self than ever before. The scars of what had happened, that dreadful splash, the snide laugh, the lonely glances were not erased. But they had faded, not into forgetfulness, but into lessons folded carefully into her soul. She had not simply endured. She had transcended. Outside the hotel cafe, Layla sat at a small table during her break, a steaming cup of chamomile in her hands. She watched the city breathe the swirl of lives and ambition rushing past the tall glass windows. This city, which had so often swallowed people like her whole, now watched her with respect, not because she asked for it, but because she had insisted through her quiet consistency that she deserved it. Julian Crest had remained a constant presence, not overbearing, never interfering, but always nearby, always aware. There was an unspoken rhythm between them now. Moments of mutual understanding passed through small glances, brief smiles, the kind of connection that doesn't demand noise to be felt. He saw her one afternoon, kneeling beside a flower bed at the hotel's rooftop garden. Her hands were in the soil, her sleeves rolled up. She looked up when he approached. "You're always tending something," Julian said gently. Layla nodded. "Life only grows if someone cares enough to nurture it." He crouched beside her. "And yet you've bloomed without anyone's help." She glanced at him, eyes calm. "That's not true. I had help, just not the kind most people notice." He understood. Her help had come in small, often invisible ways. A warm sandwich, a clean pair of gloves, a kind word spoken when the world was silent. And now, her light had begun to illuminate others. In the following weeks, Layla had started a quiet initiative. She called it the Dignity Cart, a simple rolling shelf in the staff lounge filled with new glove socks, protein bars, and small notes that read, "You are seen." No one ever saw her refill it, but everyone knew it was her. Her co-workers began changing. The whispers grew quieter. The sidelong glances softened. Even Tina, recently reinstated, stopped her one day and handed her a folded note that simply said, "Thank you for not becoming what they tried to make you." At home, Ava's drawings were pinned across their fridge stick figures of her and Layla standing atop a glittery hotel stars above their heads. One figure had a mop in her hand and a crown on her head. That evening, Julian called her outside after her shift. They stood on the same street where her story began, where tires had flung mud and laughter had scarred. "I've been thinking," he said. "This city remembers power, but it rarely remembers grace." She stayed quiet. "I want to change," that he continued, "not just with promotions or press, but with presence, with people like you leading from the ground up." Layla smiled gently. "Not everyone's ready to see people like me in rooms like that." Julian looked directly at her. "Then let's build new rooms." And in that moment, Layla realized that her story wasn't a Cinderella tale. It wasn't about being saved. It was about rising with dignity when no one offered a hand, about building something enduring with bare hands and a resolute heart. She had walked through mud, yes, but she had carried grace with her every step of the way. And now that grace was changing everything it touched. Layla Monroe's story began not with applause or grand recognition, but with a cold splash of muddy water on a forgotten sidewalk in Ashbourne. She was just a cleaner early 20s, worn shoes, quiet determination, doing her best to hold her life together while taking care of her younger sister Ava. That morning, when a wealthy woman in a luxury car laughed after humiliating her with a careless splash, Layla didn't scream or retaliate. She simply picked up her soaked bag and walked on. What she didn't know was that someone was watching a quiet billionaire named Julian Crest, whose eyes didn't just see profit margins, but people. What unfolded afterward was not a fairy tale, but a journey of resilience, integrity, and unspoken strength. Layla kept working with humility and grace, never asking for pity or favors. She weathered gossip, sabotage, and doubt, yet each day she showed up. She smiled at strangers. She cleaned with care. She didn't fight to be noticed. She simply refused to disappear. Julian, moved by her quiet courage, began to intervene, not with noise, but with intention. He helped from the shadows, at first offering new gloves, warm meals, and a transfer to better working conditions. Then he ensured the truth came out when she was wrongly accused. When the hotel staff began to notice her more, not everyone cheered. Some resented her. But Layla's strength wasn't in fighting them. It was in not becoming them. The pinnacle of her transformation wasn't just a scholarship or a promotion. It was the moment she stood in a room full of people who had once overlooked her and earned not just applause, but respect. Layla didn't need saving. She needed someone to believe that her presence mattered. And when Julian finally stepped into the light, not as a savior, but as a partner in her growth, it wasn't the beginning of a love story. It was the continuation of one woman's rise into her own light. What can we take from Layla's journey? First, that grace under pressure is power, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that endures. In a world where outrage often gets attention, quiet dignity is revolutionary. Second, that opportunity shouldn't only come to those who demand it loudly. Sometimes the ones who need it most are too busy surviving to ask. And finally, that kindness, when it's consistent, sincere, and done without expectation, can change someone's life forever. Layla's story reminds us that we don't always get to choose how the world sees us, but we can choose how we carry ourselves through it. Whether you're a hotel cleaner, a CEO, or someone stuck in between dreams and obligations, your worth isn't defined by your title. It's defined by how you treat others when no one's watching and how you continue even when no one's cheering. If her journey moved, you inspired you, or made you pause to reflect, then we invite you to support the telling of more stories like hers. Stories that shine a light on resilience, call out injustice, and prove that character always matters more than status. Subscribe to our channel and be part of a growing community that values humanity, dignity, and hope. Every click, every share helps us keep telling powerful, emotional, and true-to-life stories that deserve to be heard. Let's keep lifting voices like Layla's, because the world needs to hear them. Thank you for watching.